international science fair twice. I got fourth place in my category a couple of times. I was a science talent search, which is like one of those other science competitions that you can do as a senior in high school, semifinalist. I think those were just all things to, those are all things that helped me stand out at a more like national and international level, which I think was useful for getting the scholarship. But it's one of those things where I think you need more than there's a lot of kids who have great GPAs, did great on the SAT or ACT, took AP classes and, are generally smart. And then there's a lot of those people who are applying to school all over the place. But I think what helps, helps you stand out can be extracurricular activities that you're involved in. It doesn't necessarily have to be like competitions. It can be like cool service that you do or something else that you're really passionate about. And if you're able to convey that excitement and passion in the essays that you write, and really get other people excited about the things that you're excited about, I think that can make a big difference. So I think there's like a baseline thing that you need, which is like good enough GPA, good enough scores, like you're academically qualified. And then I think something else that the school is looking for whether that's, service experience or a great essay or, these competitions that you're involved in, just something else to make you stand out. I think plays a pretty critical role in some of these more competitive scholarships.
Mm-hmm. And another question is, how do you find which colleges offer research opportunities at the undergrad level?
Yeah, so I would say most, top, most universities that are like larger universities have research opportunities that are open to undergrads. If you're specifically interested in the medical school and medicine, I think going somewhere that has an associated medical school just makes it easier because a lot of those, even basic science and clinical research projects will exist because there are clinicians and also PhDs who are doing those doing research. But at the same time, as a student, you don't necessarily need to go to a place that has a million different research opportunities. You just need to find a couple that are going to be well suited and allow you to be like productive and have a good experience. So I would say like most schools that I'm assuming you guys are looking at have a ton of research opportunities. And one of the important things to consider, when you do start undergrad and, trying to find research opportunities is sort of shopping around, meeting with a bunch of different mentors and meeting with the heads of different labs and sitting down with them and sort of being pretty clear about what their expectations for you are, what kind of success students in their labs have had in terms of like leading their own experiments, writing abstracts or presenting their work or even writing papers. I think if you're like very upfront, with those expectations and having that clear communication, you're going to have a more fruitful experience with who you decide to do research with. I think one of my biggest regrets during undergrad was I ended up just working for 4 years with the same research PI. And I feel like I didn't do as good of a job as I should have in terms of addressing those questions and those expectations. So I didn't have a very productive, experience as a researcher during my time in undergrad. So I think one thing I would advise, as you all start college and start thinking about these things is being very intentional about who you end up working with and making sure that your expectations and the opportunities that are present in the lab that you're working in sort of align.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So we also have another question in the chat. What would you have done if you hadn't gone to medical school? Were there any other careers?
Yeah, that's a good question. Like I was saying earlier, I think for a while I thought I wanted to do just like graduate school and maybe do a PhD and like do research for a living. I think I quickly realized sort of within 6 months of college and getting that exposure, doing research that probably wasn't something that was going to be viable for me just based on my own personality and interests. And then after that, I was pretty set on medicine. I felt like I was smart enough and, I was doing well enough in my classes that I would be able to get in. So I applied to medical school without any backups, and obviously, knock on wood, it ended up working out. But I guess if, medicine just wasn't something that was interesting to me and medical school wasn't something that was interesting to me, I probably would have done something like in the realm of computer science. I took some comp sci classes as a high schooler, wasn't very good at them, but I enjoyed the thinking process and sort of the problem solving that involved. So if I had to guess, I probably would have done like CS and probably like worked at a tech company, maybe like try to get involved in like startup stuff, and things like that. But again, I feel like, once I decided that medicine was what I wanted to do, thankfully I was, felt like I was a good enough applicant where there was never never a backup plan. Maybe there should have been, but I felt like I was a good applicant and that I would be, fine during the application process.
Mm-hmm. And our next question is, can you talk about the rigor of the pre-med program at Vanderbilt? How is it exactly compared to other pre-med programs across the nation? And is there anything you wish Vanderbilt undergrad program should have taught you?
Yeah, that's a good question. So, one of the caveats, generally as somebody who's interested in medical school, you want to go to a school that's going to set you up well for, getting experiences and exposure. And I think the name of the school you go to some extent matters in med school admissions. But at the same time, because there's, generally the people who get accepted to these schools and end up going to these schools are pretty smart. They did well in high school. They did well in their, they took a ton of AP classes, did well in their SATs. They're all generally pretty smart. And I think the statistics for like Vanderbilt was like, it's a class of 1,600. I think somewhere around like 600 to 700 people come in like their freshman year pre-med. And by the end of the 4 years, I think around 200 end up applying, and most of the people end up getting in. So like out of the 200 who end up applying, like 180 to 190 end up getting in. And I think it's like that at most like top 20 schools. A lot of people come in pre-med, and then there's a lot of like early science classes that are like meant to like weed people out. They're rigorous, like the class average is a B, and most students are people who like got straight A's in high school. And then just with the average being B's, you're not going to get into med school with like a 3.0 GPA, for most folks. So a lot of people end up dropping out of pre-med after like their first or second year in college, especially at like some of these more top places that are known for weeding out students. So that's something to consider. But at the same time, I feel like it seems like most of you all are from Northern Virginia. I think Northern Virginia and like Nova schools do a really good job of preparing you for college. I think a lot of the people who really struggled with the transition came from like less rigorous schools. I feel like all of my high school friends who were interested in pre-med, like ended up doing well in unless you like really decide to slack off, and like really don't like focus, which happens to some people. And some people just like realize that medicine is not what they're interested in and like decide not to, pursue it. And that's, a great reason not to do it. But I feel like most people I know from like the Nova area, just given how competitive our schools are and, how rigorous I think our high schooling is, most people are very well prepared and well adjusted to transition to college. Like I felt like I hit the ground running. I took a lot of challenging classes. I had a 4.0 my first semester in college, and I, took like a pretty heavy course load. And I felt like it was different from high school, but I felt like very well prepared. Like the study strategies I had established in high school, like really easily translated to college, and I felt like I was doing well. So I wouldn't, especially coming out of Northern Virginia, I wouldn't let that, like going to a good school and worrying that you're not going to be smart enough to do well, like be a hindrance to not going to a good school. Like as long as you're willing to work hard, you all have like the study skills and have had the exposure to rigorous courses where you're going to be ready to do well. What was the second part of that question? So that was, yeah. So I would say it is rigorous. Like there are those stats. Like a lot of people come in pre-med, a lot of people don't end up applying to medical school. And I think that's generally the case at a lot of schools. Like lots of people come in pre-med, and there's like some weeding out that happens in some of your 101 science classes. But if you're willing to work hard and you have like just like a baseline level of like intelligence and good study skills, you'll do okay. And then the second question was, how does it compare to others in the nation? I think it's probably pretty similar. Like there's a lot of schools that are like very pre-med heavy, for better, for worse. And then the last question was, what is one thing you wish Vanderbilt's undergrad program should have taught you? I don't know. Undergrad's very different from high school, where I feel like people have a very like pretty uniform experience in high school. You take a lot of the same courses. A lot of people are involved in the same clubs. But in undergrad, it's like very much your own experience. Like you can major in like 100 different things. You can get involved in like 100 different activities. You can interact with 100 different people. So like undergrad, I think more so than high school, it's like what you make of it. So if you come in like knowing that you want to accomplish X, Y, and Z, and maybe it's you want to do well academically, you want to meet people from all around the world in the country, and like become I don't know, like whatever your goal is, like become a more confident person or become a better speaker. I think there's just resources at the undergraduate level where you just have exposure to so many different folks and so many different experiences, where if you're trying to seek something out, that there will be experiences and opportunities to to like get good at that. Get good at that. So I felt like I was very intentional during my time in undergrad of seeking out opportunities and, you know, trying to put myself out there to become the best person and learn as much as I could. So I felt pretty well prepared coming out of undergrad for med school. I think it was a pretty seamless transition as well. Med school is different, you know, for various different reasons, but I felt personally like relatively well prepared. I think the science classes did a good job of preparing me for, you know, thinking about science and learning stuff quickly. I think the extracurriculars I was involved in made me a pretty functional communicator, which is really important for talking to patients and interacting with folks from sort of different backgrounds. So I personally felt very well prepared. And I think a lot of that was just being thoughtful about how I spent my time during those 4 years, because they can be very formative and really positive years in your development as a person.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So what would you recommend to middle school and high schoolers to best manage their time? Because it's pretty overwhelming at their age.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Time management is something that's, I mean, there's like a million like self-help books, and like people have their own strategies and own ways of doing things. And I think the reason it's so difficult is it's so based on the individual. You know, one thing that works for me might not work for somebody else. So I think figuring out like specific like things that work for you, and, you know, reading online and finding like resources and applying them into your life and seeing what works for you is probably the best advice I could give. Personally, you know, I guess at the, you know, middle school, I feel like I just had a ton of fun. I feel like middle school wasn't that serious. I like wasn't involved in too much. I don't know, like went to school, was involved in like a couple of clubs, like afterward was like, did some sports and would just like hang out with friends a ton, like play outside a ton. So I feel like I didn't have to think too much about time management as a middle schooler. I think things changed, especially the later years of high school. High school, I still think was one of the busiest times in my life. I think you know, in terms of like hours of the day, I felt like I had the most going on in high school, even compared to med school or undergrad, just because you're in school for 8 hours a day, every single day. And then I was like often after school for like a couple of hours. And it was just felt like a really busy time. And I think things that I would do was, you know, obviously go to school, pay attention in class. If you're able to learn something in class and you don't have to study at home, that saves you so much time. Like immediately after school, I would go to whatever club or whatever practice I had. I played tennis in high school. I ran track in high school for a couple of years as well. So I'd often be after school for a couple of hours. And then honestly, when I would get home, I would literally just do homework for the rest of the day. I mean, it was really sad. Like looking back, I didn't probably have the most robust social life as a high schooler, but it was just busy, and I wanted to do well in school, and I had other priorities at that point. But I would like come back at like 4:35 and like study until I went to bed, just because there was so much homework and other things to do. So that was kind of how I did it. I mean, I think a lot of it just came down to discipline. But I also found time, I think, to like do other things that that were important to me in my life. Like exercise and sleep have always been really important to me. So like making sure I had time in my schedule for that. Spending time with family and friends was also important to me. So like making sure I had, dinner every day with my family when I lived at home. And then in high school, like carving out at least a couple hours every weekend, where I could like just hang out with friends and like do some more social stuff. So I think that it's always a constant balance, sort of finding a way to manage your time. But I think if you fill your days with things that both rejuvenate you and also allow you to get the things you need to get done, I think finding that balance allows you to stay productive and to manage your time well. I know that's very like non-specific, but it is it's something you're going to struggle with the rest of your life, whether you're in residency or medical school. Managing time is probably like one of the most like quintessential just like dilemmas that I think everybody faces. Hopefully that was kind of useful.
Mm-hmm. Right. And a question: would it have been sustainable for you to take CS instead of medicine?
Yeah. Do you think it would? Ooh, I guess for this question, what do you mean by sustainable?
I guess would you be satisfied with taking CS instead of medicine? Would it make you happy?
Yeah. So my parents both do computer science. They're both in IT and tech. A ton of my friends in college studied computer science, and I think they're all very happy and living very satisfying lives. I think the thing personally for me that makes me feel like, at least for me, medicine is just a more enjoyable career is I feel like a lot of my college friends, I'm 26 now, so I think we're at an older age, and whenever I hang out with them, I feel like a lot of the people, when I hang out with people who are in medicine, oftentimes there's no like existential crisis about whether what we're doing is important. Like you go into work every day, you interact with patients, you deal with really sick folks, and you help them get better. And it's just very gratifying what you do every single day. Whereas when I interact with friends who are in computer science or are in law or in like consulting or like banking or like, you know, these other like high powered professions, I feel like oftentimes when I interact with them, like they have like these like internal monologues of like, is what I'm doing, like, am I contributing positively to the world? I think oftentimes you feel like and not to say in medicine you don't feel this way sometimes, but like you feel like a cog in a system and you're working for this big company and, you know, you do what you do, but you don't necessarily see the positive impact that it has in just the people that you're interacting with. So I think one thing that's been really neat about medicine is that almost everybody I work with who has decided to pursue medicine as a field doesn't have like this crisis of like, am I doing meaningful work? Whereas I feel like some of the folks I know who are in other fields, I think grapple with it a little bit more. You know, you're young, you want to, you know, feel like the work, especially with, you know, younger generations, I think, you know, work for most of us more than just a paycheck. We want to do something meaningful, do something that contributes to society. And I think medicine, you get that. It's very gratifying and in your face that you're doing something worthwhile. Whereas I think people in other fields, like computer science being one of them, I think there's sometimes at least a question of like, is this worthwhile? So for me personally, I'm sure if I did computer science, I'd be happy, and you find other ways to find joy and meaning in your life. But I feel like medicine has allowed that to come through my work, which has been really neat. Again, and that's like a personal decision for different folks.
Yeah. So another question we got in the chat is that some people that this person already knows in middle school are talking about like bio Olympiad preparation and everything. So how much do you think this is important to our like careers, medical careers?
Sure. I think not at all. I mean, I didn't like I did science Olympiad as a high schooler. Like it was. I mean, there are people who like do like these intense, like crazy, like international, national level things. In middle school, I wasn't thinking about any of this. You know, I was enjoying my life, having a good time. I think, you know, starting sophomore and junior year of high school, when I was starting to think about college a little bit more, I think that's when I got a little bit more serious about these things. But I think just following things that you're interested in. I don't think there's a one right path to being successful in high school, being successful in college. I think just if it's something you're interested in and you think it's gonna, you know, give you joy, pursue it. Yeah, I mean, again, it's nothing that I did specifically, but to each their own. Yeah.
Yeah, and another question is, if you remember, it's been a while since you've been in high school, but do you know your GPA and SAT score?
Yeah, I graduated the 4.01 weighted. I figured out what it was weighted, but somehow got through all 4 years, pretty much got A's and everything. My SAT score it's at a 1600 now, right? I think when I took it, it was still at a 2400.
Oh yeah, the old
is it? Yeah, so I took the old one. I think it was 1550 on the 1600 scale and like 2300 ish on the 2400 scale. It was like an 800 in math and like a 750 in each of the other two, something around that.
Okay.
Yeah, so you also mentioned good undergrad schools in Virginia. So do you know like the names of these undergrad schools?
Yeah, I mean, I think they're often the ones you guys think about as good public schools in VA. So like UVA, William and Mary, Virginia Tech. I think they're all like very solid schools that'll give you opportunities to, you know, if you're interested in medicine, you know, have the research opportunities and have, you know, UVA has an affiliated medical school. William and Mary doesn't. And I also don't think it has as many research opportunities as, you know, like a place that has a medical school associated with it. But I think they're all good schools, and there's tons of people who successfully get into medical school from each of them. So I you know, there's a ton of just great, you know, public school options in Virginia. VCU is another one. You know, VCU has a associated medical school. So there are research opportunities and sort of volunteering opportunities that you can take advantage of.
Mm-hmm. And another question is, did you take a gap year before starting med school?
I did not. I went straight through. I think in my med school class, about half of the people had taken a gap year, which is, you just do research for a year, or do something internationally for a year, or like do like a completely different career for a while. There's some people who like come into medicine very non-traditional, like they had other careers, they were teachers for years, they were nurses, they like were in law and like had like 10 years before finishing undergrad and going to medical school. So there's no right way to do it. I think I just knew I wanted to do medicine, and I didn't see the benefit of delaying it by a year or two. So I didn't take any time off. But I think it's becoming more and more common now, just with medical school becoming more competitive and people feeling like they need more time to get some of those extracurricular experiences and know for sure that this is what they want to pursue. I think the statistics now are like over 50% of people who matriculate to medical school have taken 1 or 2 years off, or even more.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So a personal question of my own, there's like a lot of programs. So like apart from BSMD, do you take like any other programs during like maybe high school, like let's say shadowing or something?
Sure. You mean like hospitals that are offering like shadowing opportunities?
Yeah. Did you take like any of those opportunities?
Yeah. So the one thing I did in high school that sort of got me exposed to medicine, but like probably didn't sell me on it enough to commit to it going into undergrad. I volunteered at Inova Fairfax through like something called I think it was called the HELP program. It was like Hospital Elder Life Program. It was this thing where I'd show up for like a couple hours every week and work with some of the more like geriatric and older patients in the hospital, and just like talk to them about like really anything that they wanted, and like did activities with them and like encourage them to like exercise and stay like mentally and physically active while they're in the hospital. So that's something I did as a high schooler. And I think most like hospitals have something like equivalent for high school students. Maybe it's a little bit harder right now with COVID and wanting to keep like non-essential folks out of the hospital just for patient safety and your own safety. But that was something I did as a high schooler. I don't necessarily think you need to have those experiences. If you're trying to do a BSMD program, you probably do. I think having some exposure to medicine so you can talk about it and know that, convince people that that's what you want to do for a living is important. But again, I think if you're interested in medicine in the long, there's tons of opportunities when you're an undergrad to get involved in hospital volunteering and shadowing.
Yeah. So if you have any other questions in the chat, you can let us know.
And feel free to ask me anything. I'm happy to be as honest. I mean, whether it's about scores or like whatever, like I don't care. This is all just behind me. Happy to be as useful as I can be.
Mm-hmm.
I can talk about where else I applied to college, whatever else is useful for you all.
And just a personal question of mine. When you're in high school, did you have like independent research you published in like a journal or anything like that?
So I did science fair experiments that were, I think, kind of cool, but like whether they were rigorous science, not at all. So it was nothing that was published anywhere. But it was I think I just showed a lot of initiative and like did stuff that I thought was exciting and cool and was like really jazzed up about it. And for whatever reason was able to make other scientists think it was like pretty believable. So like did well in like some of these competitions, but none of it was published as a high schooler. Like the work I did in college for 4 years, none of that was published. None of the stuff like science and other things I did as a high schooler and undergrad were ultimately published. It wasn't until medical school where I was able to publish some stuff. So that's like by no means an expectation.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So can you speak about like, do you know like the diversity of Vanderbilt? Like,
yeah,
was there like an equal amount of races, or like how was it?
Yeah. So this is like statistics you can find online.
Mm-hmm.
But I guess it's pretty comparable to like most top 20 schools. It was actually probably less diverse than I felt like high school was in Northern Virginia. And I feel like that's probably the experience most of you all will have. And even if you go to like some of these top schools, like especially if you guys go to TJ and stuff where it's like a ridiculous amount of Asian folks, like that's just not going to be the reality of wherever you go to undergrad. So it felt less diverse to me than high school did, but still very diverse. I think the statistics are like somewhere between like 60 to 65% white, like, 15-ish% Asian, like 10 to 15% Hispanic and Black, and then sort of a mix of other things. So it was very diverse. And I think the cool thing about undergrad is, you don't just have people from the same like geographic area. You have folks from all over the country, all over the world, with a lot of different life experiences. And then you also, I think, have more like variability in people's socioeconomic background. I think Northern Virginia folks are generally pretty well off. And then I think a lot of these top schools do a really good job of giving aid and opportunities to folks who don't have that same background. So you just learn a ton from the various different folks that are there. And I think that's one of the most important things in undergrad is getting exposed to people from very different walks of life.
Mm-hmm. It looks like we have less than a minute in this meeting. We'd like to thank you for attending this webinar. You gave a lot of great information that would be really helpful to everyone.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm happy to. I'll provide my email, so if anybody has any specific questions, they can reach out to me. I just put it in the chat.
Right. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
You all.